Welcome back, keepers of the flame. The night is at its deepest hour, when truths whisper loudest. The prince has seen the circle, and the maiden's song has taken root in the city's cracks. Now, the soil of two souls must be turned, the hard ground of pride broken open to receive the softening rain of wisdom. This is the episode of Wet Clay and Patient Hands, of lessons learned not from scrolls, but from shared sweat and the language of a mended net. Prince Kofi returned to Adwoa's neighborhood the next day, again in simple clothes. This time, he did not linger at the edge. When he saw Amma preparing to walk to the public well, he fell into step beside her, carrying an empty water jar he had awkwardly procured. She did not greet him as a prince, nor did she acknowledge his disguise. "The line is long at this hour," she said simply, as if to a neighbor. "The sun is unforgiving." It was a lesson in practicality, a virtue that ignored status in favor of common sense. At the well, Kofi's clumsiness was apparent. His hands, skilled with a sword and a pen, fumbled with the heavy bucket. The women in line watched with amusement and suspicion. One older woman clicked her tongue. "You handle the jar like it's a bird that might fly away, young man. Put your back into it." Amma said nothing, just expertly filled her own jars and waited. Humiliation burned Kofi's cheeks, but he persisted, finally managing to haul up a sloshing, half-full bucket. The physical reality of this basic task, its weight, its effort, was a humbling scripture written in sore muscles and spilled water. After the well, Amma went to sit with the potter, Kwaku, in his dusty workshop. Kofi followed, his back already aching. Kwaku was trying to work with poor, gritty clay that cracked as it dried. Amma took a lump, kneading it with her fingers as she listened to Kwaku lament. Kofi watched, then tentatively picked up a smaller lump. "Like this?" he asked, mimicking her motion. Amma nodded. For an hour, they kneaded clay in silence, the only sound the slap of wet earth and Kwaku's low grumbling. The virtue practiced was perseverance, the undramatic, repetitive work of making a foundation. As they worked, Amma began to hum the memory song of deep, cool clay beds. Kofi felt the gritty lump under his own hands grow subtly smoother, more cohesive. It wasn't magic he saw, it was influence. Her song didn't command the clay, it reminded the clay of its best self. He understood then the difference between forcing a change and inviting one. The ancestors' guidance. When the extraordinary sits with the ordinary, miracles become chores done well, was no longer a story. It was the feel of clay under his fingernails. Kofi began to visit daily. He stopped thinking of it as observation and started thinking of it as learning. He gave up his trader's tunic for clothes borrowed from a stable hand, clothes that allowed him to move and sweat. He learned to sit quietly, not to offer solutions, but to hear the problems. One afternoon, he listened as two farmers debated whether to plant their last precious seeds. "The earth is too thirsty," one said. "But if we do not plant, we have surrendered," said the other. Kofi, who had once dictated planting schedules from the palace, felt the terrible weight of that choice in his gut. Later, he asked Amma, "How do you bear hearing this every day?" "The worry, it's crushing." She was mending a basket. "I do not bear it alone," she said. "We share it. A shared burden is a half burden. That is what your soldiers, with their commands, could not understand. You cannot order a burden to be light. You must help carry it." She spoke the proverb, "A single stick may smoke, but many sticks together create a warming fire." Kofi looked at the circle of people who now accepted his silent presence and realized he was being offered a place at a fire he hadn't known was burning. A pivotal moment came with the basket. It was a large, beautifully patterned market basket belonging to Adwoa, with a broken rim. Amma was repairing it with fresh reeds. Kofi watched the intricate, swift weave of her fingers. "Can you teach me?" he asked. It was the first time he had asked to be taught something with his hands. Amma nodded, handing him reeds. His large, clumsy fingers snapped the first few. He grunted in frustration, the old impulse to demand success rising. Amma placed her hands over his, guiding the motion. "Do not fight the reed," she said softly. "Follow its strength. It will tell you where it wants to bend." Her touch was calm, her instruction devoid of impatience. It was a lesson in the virtue of guidance versus command. Under her hands, he felt the pliable strength of the reed and the gentle firmness of her direction. He was not being forced, he was being shown. Slowly, a crude but functional stitch took shape. It was the most insignificant thing he had ever made, and yet the pride he felt in that crooked stitch was purer than any he'd felt receiving royal praise. One evening, the talk turned to the palace. The people spoke not with the treasonous anger Kofi feared, but with a weary disappointment. "They live behind walls," said one man. "They think our hunger is a report, not a rumble in their own bellies." Another added, "The young prince, they say, is all sharp edges, like a new tool that has never been used, ready to cut what it should cultivate." Kofi, sitting among them, felt each word like a lash. He was not being insulted. His essence was being accurately described, and the description was of something useless. He wanted to defend himself, to reveal who he was and declare his newfound understanding. But Amma caught his eye and gave a slight shake of her head. The virtue required here was restraint, and the lesson was brutal. Listen to the truth about yourself, even when it is given in ignorance. Swallowing his pride was harder than drawing water or weaving reeds. That night, the dream of the leopard returned. This time, the leopard was licking its paws, and its eyes held a deep, knowing peace. The gold thread was gone. Kofi finally asked the question that had been burning in him. He and Amma were walking back from delivering a repaired grinding stone to a miller. "Why did your song not work in the palace? Was it the stone? The distance?" Amma stopped, looking at the red thread on her wrist. "It was the intention," she said. "In the palace, the intention was to take water, to store it, to control it. My song is one of relationship, giving thanks, asking permission, promising care. You cannot build a relationship on taking. The spirits of the sky and earth do not answer that call. They answer the call of mutual need." She picked up a handful of dry soil. A king who sees the land as a possession is like a man who sees this dust as dirt. A farmer who sees it as the mother of life speaks to it differently. My song is the farmer's language. This was the core cultural belief, the understanding of the world as a web of reciprocal relationships, not a hierarchy of ownership. Kofi's entire education had been one of ownership. He was beginning to learn the language of kinship. Inspired, Kofi made a request of his father. He asked to visit Amma's village, not with an envoy, but with just a few guards, and to go as a learner. The king, seeing the profound change in his son, agreed. The journey back was a mirror of Amma's first trip, but the perspective was reversed. Kofi now saw the parched fields not as a statistical problem, but as the dying livelihood of specific people he could imagine. He noticed the way the birds were silent. He felt the anxiety in the air. When they arrived, the village was wary. They saw the prince who had taken Amma, but then they saw Amma herself, and the way she walked beside him, not behind him. And they saw Kofi, not in royal regalia, but in the dust-stained clothes of a laborer, his hands visibly calloused. Old Kweku squinted at him. "You look different, Prince," he said, his voice not welcoming, but curious. "The sun and the road have a way of remaking a man," Kofi replied, bowing his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect, not from a prince to a subject, but from a young man to an elder. Kofi was given a hut to stay in, the same one used for visiting kin. He ate what the village ate, pounded yam with simple, sparse soup. He attended the evening gatherings, listening as the elders spoke in proverbs and slow, measured stories. He witnessed a naming ceremony for a new child, where the entire village gathered to speak the child's name into the world, weaving the infant into the community's fabric. This cultural tradition of collective belonging stood in stark contrast to the palace's solitary, formal announcements of royal births. He asked to learn. Yaw the fisherman, still suspicious, took him to the river. Kofi's task was not to fish, but to clean nets, a messy, smelly, tedious job. Yaw watched him, then grunted, "You learn the river by caring for what it gives, not just by taking from it. A torn net is a debt to the river." Kofi, scraping scales and mending small holes, began to understand stewardship as a daily, humble practice, not a grand proclamation. The river, though low, seemed to chuckle at his efforts. The greatest test came with the earth itself. Kofi joined the men and women in the fields, attempting to help break the hard-baked soil for the eventual, hoped for rain. A hoe was a different beast from a sword. Within an hour, blisters rose and burst on his palms. His back screamed in protest. An older woman, seeing him struggle, wordlessly showed him how to swing using the weight of a tool, not the strength of his arms. It was a lesson in efficiency and wisdom over brute force. At the end of the day, filthy and exhausted, he sat with the others at the edge of the field. Someone passed a gourd of palm wine. The shared fatigue was a bond. No one spoke of the drought for a moment. They simply existed together in their weariness. Kofi felt a sense of belonging more profound than any loyalty sworn in a throne room. This was the virtue of solidarity, earned through shared sweat, not demanded by birthright. He was being braided into the village, one blister, one shared drink at a time. Amma watched Kofi's integration with a careful eye. She saw his genuine effort, his willingness to be wrong, his growing silence as he listened more. One evening, she found him by the river, staring at the red thread she had once worn, which he had asked to see. "It's just a thread," he said, almost to himself, but it held an entire world. Amma sat beside him. "It still does," she said. "The promise is not in the thread, but in the wearing of it. It is a choice, renewed every day." She told him then of the Asamdui in Kamo, the peace invocation performed before she used her gift. "It was not just for me," she explained. "It was for them, to align their hearts, to share the responsibility. My song was never mine alone. It was always the village's song, sung through me. You tried to own the singer, but the song belongs to everyone." This was the ultimate revelation. True power was not proprietary. It was circulatory. A leader did not generate power. He facilitated its flow among the people. A crisis struck the village. A child, chasing a lizard, fell into a deep, dry well that had been covered by brittle branches. He was trapped, unhurt but terrified, in the dark. The villagers gathered, panic rising. Ropes were fetched, but the well was narrow. Kofi pushed through the crowd. In the palace, he would have ordered experts. Here, there were only willing hands. He took charge, but his voice was not one of command. It was one of coordination. "You, hold the rope here. You, bring those thicker branches to brace the edge. You keep calling to him, so he hears our voices." He organized a human chain, using the principles of leverage and shared weight he was learning. He himself was lowered into the well, his shoulders scraping against the stone. He found the sobbing child, calmed him with a steady voice that held no prince's arrogance, only a man's reassurance, and secured the rope around him. They were hauled up together. It was the virtue of decisive action, but action rooted in the collective strength of the community, not imposed upon it. When the child was safe, the village looked at Kofi not as a prince, but as a man who had gotten dirty with them in a time of need. That night, the village held an impromptu gathering. There was singing, not for rain, but for the child's safe return. Kofi was given the place of honor, a carved stool brought out for him. Old Kweku stood before him, holding a calabash of water. "Prince," he said, his voice formal but warm, "you came to us as one who takes. Today you gave. You gave your strength, your courage, and your dirty shoulders to our child. We see you." He poured a libation. "May your roots now drink from the same water as ours." It was an informal but profound ritual of acceptance. Kofi, overwhelmed, could only nod his thanks. The proverb, "Until lions have their own historians, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter," flashed in his mind. He realized he no longer wanted to be just the hunter in the story. He wanted to be part of the pride, the land, the whole living narrative. The red thread's promise was being offered to him, not as a physical object, but as a place in the circle. With trust established, the village and Kofi spoke openly of the drought. The elders explained their belief that the land's spirit was out of balance. grieving the disconnect between the throne and the people. "The rain will come," Okomfo Panin said, "when it hears a song from the whole land, not a plea from an isolated palace or a starving village. The song must be in harmony." Kofi understood. The kingdom was a body, and the palace had been a clenched fist, cutting off circulation. The hand needed to open, to touch, to feel. He asked Amma, in front of the elders, what should be done. She said, "We must sing the song together, from the palace to the furthest field." Not a command, but an invitation. An invitation to remember our connection to the water, the earth, and to each other. She proposed a great gathering at the confluence of the kingdom's major river, a place of symbolic and literal coming together. It would be a ritual of realignment. Kofi, without hesitation, agreed to organize it from the palace's side, to use his authority not to compel, but to convene. Returning to the palace, Kofi was a transformed man. He went immediately to his father. He did not report. He shared. He spoke of the blisters, the rescued child, the taste of shared palm wine, the wisdom of the elders. The king listened, a slow smile spreading across his weary face. He saw his son had learned the lesson he had feared to teach, that a throne is a seat of service, not a pedestal of privilege. "What do you need, my son?" he asked. "I need to open the gates," Kofi said. "Not just the physical ones. I need to use our authority to invite, not to instruct. We will host a gathering, but we will not dictate its prayers. We will provide the space, the security, the food. But the people and their voices and Amma's song will lead." It was a plan that turned the traditional hierarchy on its head. The king saw the wisdom in it, the ancestors' guidance finally heeded. A leader who learns to listen carries more than a throne. He carries a village. He gave his full blessing. The final chapter of this braiding began with preparation. Messengers were sent to every corner of the kingdom, not with a decree, but with an invitation. "Bring your thirst, your prayers, and a vessel for water. Come to the great confluence." The palace doors were opened to provide food for the journey, for those who needed it. Kofi, wearing his simple clothes, oversaw the logistics himself, consulting with Amma and representatives from different villages, including his own adopted one. He was no longer a prince imposing a solution. He was a steward facilitating a communal act of faith. On the eve of the journey to the confluence, Kofi stood with Amma on a palace balcony, looking out over the capital. The old, sterile song of the stone garden was gone. In its place was a low, vibrant hum of anticipation, the sound of a people hoping together. Amma held out her hand. In her palm lay a new red thread. "A ruler needs to remember his promise too," she said. He held out his wrist, and she tied it on, the same 7 knots. It was not a copy of hers. It was its own vow. The virtue sealed in that knot was integrity, the alignment of one's position with one's purpose. The braiding was complete. The singer and the prince were now 2 strong strands, ready to be part of a much larger weave. So the roots were braided with river mud, and a prince learned to wear his title like a thread, not a chain. The people are gathering, their vessels empty, their hearts full of a fragile hope. All journeys now lead to the meeting of the waters. But will the sky heed a song sung by 1,000 cracked lips? Can a kingdom remember how to be a chorus? The fire is but embers now, but the dawn is near. Stay until the end, for the final episode brings the long-awaited rain and reveals where true crowns are forged.